Hey, what's up everyone? Back here with a couple more games on chess.com and the Blitz pool. We're going to jump right into it, starting off with the rating of 2656. I'm going to be continuing to play my Chessable repertoire recommendations, so let's jump right into the games. Alright, got our first opponent. They're starting off with c4, so it's going to be a little bit hard to play a Chessable recommendation. I'm going to start with knight f6. We'll see if they play d4. If they had played d4, we could go for c5 and kind of transpose into a binko. Given the circumstance, I'm still going to play c5 anyways, and we'll just see what they decide to go for. They go for d3, which feels a little bit passive. Let's go d5 and strike in the center. Recapture here. Develop the knight to c6. Probably look to play g6 and bishop g7. Can also play e5, which I like the look of. Let's drop this knight backwards to avoid the bishop. We do end up with a Maroczy bind pawn structure going on here, which I do like at this point. I'm going to go rook to b8 so that I can play b6 without being on the diagonal of the bishop on g2. And we're going to play here a5 to limit the b4 option. Probably they can still play b4 anyways, because my knight is pulled. Yeah, I was going to say, my knight is kind of pulled in two different directions here. I do have the option of f5. I think that being said, I'm going to capture here first, and then let's flick in. We might flick in f5 here. Feels a little risky. If I take with the knight, he's going to eliminate the knight and then take e5. Not crazy about the doubled pawn situation at that point. Okay, we're going to go for f5. Probably they're going to play knight g5. If they check first, I have bishop e6, so I'm not worried about that. Knight g5 is for sure what they're going to play, though, because then queen to b3 is the threat. Now, though, if I take with the... Well, now I'm not worried about the c5 pawn. I will say that here. So I'm not worried about them taking on c5 as much. Queen b3, though, is still a problem. Let's go queen e8. I'm not crazy about this situation, but I am keeping everything protected. If they check and I move the king, I have the f7 square covered. I do want to play h6 very soon to kick the knight backwards, and then I'll be able to develop the bishop after that. Thankfully, b5 is not an option either. I can take that. Oh, wait. He could play b5. Probably that's what he should do, because, yeah, there it is. We're going to try to make the best of this. So let's go knight to d4. If he does win e5, we still take b5, though, because... Alright, well, this doesn't work, right? I can take this guy, open up this attack on the knight. I think that was a blunder. Yeah, we're going to take this. If bishop f4, I have knight to e2 check. Here, though, I drop the knight back to e6, and I think I am picking off the bishop on f4. Let's make sure I don't get the queen trap. Knight e6, bishop here, rook e8, f4. I take e3, so I'm not... if he ever plays f4, I'll take on e3. Understandable, I can't trade here and take d4 because the knight hangs. Let's just back the queen up. Still threatening this guy on g5. If he takes on c5, I'll take here and then take g5. Bishop f4 I take. I guess he has to play bishop h4, which looks absolutely atrocious. And then maybe I'll take b5 or go bishop e7 to trade bishops. But yeah, the fact that this bishop is hanging is not good news for him. Okay, well, we're happy to trade. And then I can take this. He's going to play rook c6 if I do that. Maybe I'll just go knight e6. I'm happy to trade the queens. If he pushes, I play knight to d4. In a case like this, I don't really want to open up the position. I really just want to... yeah, let's step away from the pin. I really just want the knight on d5, or the knight on d4, quite honestly. Or on c5. This blocks the c file, which is quite good. Can try to trade the queens, or trade the bishop, sorry. I guess I'll just go to here, get this trade happening if he goes for it. And yeah, we're just up a piece. Guess he has one pawn in return. I think I'll just go here, here, and play rook e6 if he tries to play rook d6. Let's give ourselves an escape square just in case. Let's go here to deal with any rook e6 shenanigans. Go here to try to play rook to d7. Okay. He has to trade queens now. Okay, well, I get to trade queens then. 'Let's walk the king over. Get the knight to c3, where then I can get the b5 pawn. Might play g4. Okay, knight c3, move the rook, and I take the pawn. Take that. Do this. Might play g5, who knows. Okay, we check here. Do this, play h... I think I'll just start pushing the pawn, honestly. Just push again. He'll play f5 probably. Let's get the rook behind the pawn. Push this. Walk the king over. I think this is just a straightforward win here. Especially nice that I'm going to have the rook stay protecting the pawn on g6. And we get the win. Okay, so got the W there. Let's review the game real quick as well. Okay, so opponent starts at c4. Can't really play something that is an accessible recommendation that I have if I haven't made a course against c4 just yet. Though I do plan on making one in the future against all the moves that aren't e4 and d4. But that'll be down the road at some point. So c4, knight f6. A little bit hoping he'd play d4 so we can turn it into a bingo gambit, but alas, doesn't go for that. Plays knight c3 here instead. c5, many different moves are playable here. I'm just going to probably go with knight f6 and c5 type setups against moves that aren't e4 or d4. Goes for d3, felt a little passive, decided to go for d5. And pretty quickly here we end up with a Maroczy bind, which is characterized by the pawns on e5 and c5 against our opponent's in this case e2 and d3 pawns. It is a slight advantage for black in the grand scheme of things, mainly because we have a little bit more space, but white does have opportunities to counterattack our center and put some pressure on it. Usually if you think about a Maroczy bind type pawn structure, it's usually white who has it versus an opponent who's playing something like a Sicilian defense. In this case, it's kind of a reverse of that. It's kind of white who almost is playing the Sicilian defense, and we're playing like an e4 type of opening, even though it's from black's perspective with the pawn on e5. So the bishop went to g2. I dropped the knight back to avoid trouble on the diagonal. We get developed here. And yeah, with this setup of bishop to d2 and rook to c1, the computer is not a huge fan of this, but I do think it poses some practical issues here. He's going to play knight e4 or knight a4 to hit the c-pawn, and then he's going to try to play for one of these pawn breaks, whether it's d4 or b4, trying to go after the c5 pawn, and which is pretty much what he does in the game. So I went rook b8, and then b6 afterwards. Probably in hindsight, a little bit more precise to do something like knight to e6 or knight to a6. That way my knight on c6 is still defended. Because apparently after b6, he could have also have even tried b4 right away, because if I take with the pawn, I lose the knight. If I take with the knight, he gets the e5 pawn. So he already had a bit of an opportunity to pull this off. He went for a3 first, and then still goes for it anyways. I do trade. And, okay, I am happy to see that f5 was actually the best move. I wasn't really 100% sure about this during the game, but it does end up working out here. And then queen to e8. Okay, queen to e8 was the second best move. I guess that's fine to go for. b5, apparently knight to d8 would be better. A little bit unexpected, seems a little passive, but I guess does make sense. And yeah, here he makes his big mistake. Apparently knight to d4 for me is a blunder, but then he blunders right back next move with knight takes e5. It looks like he should have taken on d4, and then bishop c6, and gets a little bit awkward for my pieces. My knight on c7 especially is under some fire, and yeah, black is, you know, a bit worse off here. So he didn't find that opportunity. He took e5 instead, which was a big mistake. We do open up the discovered attack onto the knight. If he tries bishop f4 to make the skewer, I have queen to e7 to guard the knight there, so that's not a problem. And for the most part, the rest of the game was just about picking off things and trading material. I could have played knight takes b5 here, apparently. Knight to e6 was also quite good, mainly just to trade pieces. Put the queen on d6, make the exchange. I guess I could have taken d4, but knight to e6 looks perfectly good as well. Get away from the pin. And pretty much here, once the d4 pawn and c5 pawns get traded, now my knight has a very solid support point on c5 protected by the b6 pawn. And pretty much at this point, it's game over. I just have to exchange a few more pieces, pick off the b5 pawn, and that's pretty much how things went. Develop, try to trade the bishops, fight against the rooks on the open file in a moment. Also played h6 just to avoid any back rank problems. Inevitably, we trade pieces, trade queens, and then I do get the knight around to c3, pick off the b pawn, and from here it's pretty much over. I'm going to use my pass b pawn on the b file to push up the board and make a queen, as I work towards doing in the game. So, all right, that's our first game. Let's go ahead and jump into our second one, and we will see who we get. All right, we are against Mr. Frederick Savane. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but Grandmaster 3000 rated. He's also streaming right now. Let's go for the same opening as the previous game. If he goes d3, we'll also go d5. Okay, we're still going to go d5. We might have a very, very similar position. I don't think he's going to play knight f3. Oh, okay. I'm going to play knight c6, e5. This setup's a little bit different. White wants to potentially take on c6 in order to mess up my pawn structure. So with that in mind, I'm going to play the move bishop to d7. He's probably going to play knight to c4. I'm going to play f6 to guard the pawn, and then probably look to play b5 here. And I don't know if you're supposed to do it right away or if you're supposed to develop the bishop first. He's going to know probably the theory better than I am for sure. I think I'm going to develop first and then look to play b5 next. And this is a pawn sacrifice. I may not be playing it... Oh, okay, it's not doing that. It might not have been a pawn sacrifice after I played f6, I guess. There are variations where you play b5, they take on c6, they win the e-pawn, and then you drop the bishop back to b7 and have compensation. But, okay, here I'm going to take... Goes into d5 anyways. Interesting. I can take g3. Whatever I do, I need to play pretty quickly here. I'm going to take g3. I have no clue if this is best. I very well could be walking into something very annoying. Yeah, I'm gonna take g3. I have no idea, to be honest with you. Probably I anticipate he takes on c7. He could play bishop f4, I guess. Your guess is as good as mine as to any kind of theory here. He is pausing, so either I've done something wrong or he messed up a move order, because if this was something he was used to, he would not be slowing down there.
Ich glaube, das war irgendwie HG. Irgendwie kann ich mich an irgend sowas erinnern, das mal analysiert zu haben. Okay, irgendwie sinnvoll. So logisch sieht das gerade nicht aus. Ich habe einen Bauern weniger. Vielleicht läuft f4.
Alright, I guess I will take this pawn with check. So I'm up 2 pawns. He's probably going to win the b pawn. If I trade knights, I have to worry about the c7 fork. Probably he takes with the bishop, but I guess I have to trade. Knight e6, he takes on b5 anyway, so let's trade. I'm not going to be able to castle, but I don't know if that's the biggest deal in the world, to be honest with you. He wants to play probably like knight e4. I don't really care about this b pawn as much as he might think I do. Or he might think... If he takes here, I'm going to go knight d4. That's my idea. I also have ideas of bishop h3 opening up the attack on this bishop on d5. I am up 2 pawns. I don't know. Okay, he does guard the bishop, but now he can't play knight e4. I can play knight to d4, though. Maybe bishop e6, maybe b4. Knight e2, I have bishop g4. I don't know, Mr. Svane. I'm curious what he's saying in the stream. It does say he's streaming now, but I mean, I'm up 2 pawns. I'm down a minute, so that's the biggest problem. But I'm up 2 pawns. I don't think I'm getting crushed here. He's gonna try to go queen g7, but I can go bishop e6 to trade bishops. If he goes here, I move the rook to f8. I can also go b4 first. b4 first looks pretty good. The knight doesn't really have a good place to go. He's going to have to go to d1. He can throw in queen g7, but I play rook f8. Hold on. Rook f8, he takes on h7, and then he's threatening g6. Okay, I might have fumbled this move order here a bit. I should have gone bishop e6, then I had king d7. That might have been better. Okay, I think I have to play rook f8, though. He's going to take on h7, of course. And now this does not look great. Let's move the queen. He's gonna take on g6. I move over, but the knight still doesn't have a ton of places to go. I also have bishop e6 and rook g8. There's your queen.
Oh mein Gott. Ja, okay. Jetzt verliert er Zeit.
Rook takes here is a threat. Okay, let's still go here. And then drop the queen back. Okay, I'm gonna try to get the queen over there somehow. No clue if this is what I should be doing. I can check. I have no time on the clock, though. I'm playing way too slow. He also throws in some cheeky bishop f7. Okay. Anyways, way too slow there. I'll maybe stitch in the stream that he was doing during this in the video. You might see that kind of interloped, I suppose. Okay, obviously bishop f7's really silly, but he was just doing that because of the time situation. But yeah, I don't know. Let's check that game out. Very interesting. It's been a while since I played a 3,000 rated Grandmaster. I think he's also definitely over 2,600 FIDE. Okay, so let's check it out. So opening-wise, we get the same exact opening, or very similar to the game we just took a look at. Yeah, I mean, black is already doing totally fine here. I go for the bishop d7 move, protecting the knight on c6. I'm not a huge fan personally of this kind of structure. I mean, maybe the computer says that black is doing fine here, but I don't know. You get the bishop pair, but you end up with kind of this wonky pawn structure. The knight on c4 is hard to deal with. Personally, just not a huge fan of it. I do like the bishop pair, pretty biased for that, but I also don't really like the pawn structure. So I just decided to avoid that situation. Oops, sorry. Bishop d7. Goes knight c4. And yeah, apparently you can go for b5 right away. I went for f6 first, but b5 is the most precise. I guess especially here since he can't take on c6. Yeah, because he's not castled yet, right? If he was castled, then he would be able to do this, and I wouldn't be able to take the rook in the corner. But because he's not castled here, I just take the rook. So actually, yeah, b5 would have been much better in hindsight. I do it in the game a few moves later anyways, but yeah, I could have gone for it right away. Bishop e7, he plays f4. Okay, now b5 is necessary. Computer says best move. He goes back, take on f4, and then knight to d5. Yeah, this is... I don't know if this is him just kind of improvising. Again, we'll stitch in the stream. Also, I think he streams in German, maybe. So I have no clue if I'll be able to understand anything in the stream anyways. But yeah, black is just better here. He is definitely playing this kind of on the fly, and we are just up 2 pawns. We trade the knights. He takes with the bishop. Rook c8 is the best move here. b4 is also good. Okay, so yeah, they're both the key idea. I do play b4 afterwards. Sorry, I go knight d4 first. Yeah, maybe b4 first is a little bit better. I thought if I went b4 first, he had knight to b5. But then apparently h5. I guess h5 stops queen h5 check, but I would never have thought about h5 here in a million years, to be honest with you. So, okay, knight d4 first. Checks, have to block. Queen goes here. Okay, b4 is good. This was fine. Rook f8's good. He takes the pawn. Queen to b6 is good. Okay, so he actually gets to win the 2 pawns back, but my position is still better here. c4 would have been very strong. I did not think about that. c4 opens up diagonal towards the king. This is very dangerous for white. I went for bishop e6 though, because I wanted to play rook to g8 as seen in the game, and then I got to trap the... maybe not trap, but I got to pin the queen. And I am simply better here. Bishop d6 would guarantee a trade of pieces. That would have been very good. He can't go knight c4 to make the fork in hindsight because I can take here with check. So yeah, bishop d6 would have been best. But I have 10 seconds to his minute and a half. Yeah, the biggest problem here is I just played way too slow. And there's no increment or anything like that. So the speed of play is definitely super important. Yeah, I'm better at the end here, even before he does the silly bishop f7 move. But yeah, I mean, when I have no time on the clock, it's... not gonna do me any favors here. So yeah, nice to be able to play against a very strong opponent like this. But he gets the win. You know, congrats to him. But okay, I'm relatively happy at least with the quality of play, even though the speed of play was not very good. But all right, let's go ahead and let's go ahead and jump right into our next one. All right, we had 2 different games from the black perspective. Now we are going to be playing the white perspective, going for a Reti Nimzo Larsen approach. Do recommend c4 in the course here. e3, knight c3. I've played against Phony Sally a number of times. Yeah, it looks like at least 17 to 20 times somewhere in there. Okay, so after b6, here I'm going to take the pawn on d5. He is probably going to take with the knight. We're going to make the trade. If the queen takes, I have bishop c4. If he takes with the pawn, inevitably he will probably play d4. I will play, he'll play c5 at some point. I'll play d4 at some point, and we will end up with a hanging pawn structure or an isolated pawn situation. Okay, I'm going to play d4 here. Pawn takes, I have queen takes. Threaten mate. Next I'll castle, and then it depends a little bit on where he puts the knight. Knight on d7, as far as I understand, is better than knight on c6 in these structures. I'm not in a rush to take the pawn on c5, because I'd really rather him take me. But we're probably going to go for queen to b8 is kind of a wild move. What do you do about bishop b5? But now I take on c5, right? Am I crazy? Take here. Bishop takes, I take the knight. And if pawn takes, I still take the knight, I believe. Is there any merit to throwing in bishop to e5 here? Probably not. I kind of like the fact that the queen's doing nothing. On b8, the only thing I have to watch out for is this diagonal. Am I crazy here? I think I take this. And then I just win the pawn. I put the knight on d4, and then I'm just better, as far as I understand. Let's go back here. Block this next move. He might play d4 just to kind of give the pawn up. If he doesn't play d4, the bishop on b7 ends up being terrible. Queen to b6 is not a bad idea either. Let's see here. In hindsight, maybe the rook on c1 would have been a little more precise. Let's go bishop d3. If he goes d4, I'm still playing knight takes. Probably this is his shot, though. d4. I might also play e4. All right. Queen d2. Try to get the rook to d1. Take back with the bishop if he does that. If he goes d4, I think I'm playing e4 in hindsight. Because I've got a pretty decent blockade on the pawn. Yeah, I think I'm going to go for this. Try to keep this bishop limited. I'm not a huge fan of the bishop on d3, to be honest. A little surprised he takes with... He could have played rook to c3, maybe. Okay, we're going to do this, and then line up towards the d-pawn. I'm not threatening to take it because the bishop would hang, but it is at least something that that black will have to worry about. I'd also like to get the knight around to d3 in hindsight. Maybe knight on c4 is also pretty good. So yeah, let's go for queen d2. Try to get the knight to c4. Bishop on c4, knight on d3 is also a good setup, I think. e5 is an idea. Like queen e7, e5, maybe. Whatever I do, though, needs to be a bit quicker. Okay, knight d2 to c4, and then maybe I can play some f4, e5 stuff. I do have a pawn majority on the king side, so trying to mobilize that at some point is going to be a decent idea. I don't really want to let him make that exchange. I want to keep this knight alive. But he could play bishop a6 and try to trade into an opposite color bishop position. But I might try to set up some g3, f4 thing. He wants to go queen c3, but what if I go... Bishop c2 and then queen to d3? I might go bishop a6, in which case I probably have to go back. I am threatening to take d4, though, I guess. I can't go here yet, because he'll win e4. But I do have knight here, right? Knight d6. And then queen to d3. Oh, wait, hold on a second. I do have this. If I take with the bishop and he takes e4, I have knight d3. Oh, but he has this capture. Ah. Does he, though? Hold on. If I take rook e... Yeah, knight d6 here. Oh, wait a second. If he takes here, this is check. But he has king f8. I don't think this works for me, in hindsight. I need to get rid of this pawn. What if I go here, though? I hit the bishop. But he's going to block and then try to push. Yeah, this is not working for me. Bishop f5 is kind of lights out, as far as I can tell. Oh, he's doing this. Interesting. Okay, let's go here. I want to play rook c5. He doesn't have a fantastic place to move. Oh, wow, this is very surprising. All right, let's go here. Okay. I don't think this is probably the best way to do things, but I'm going to try to just burn him on moves here. A little bit too slow. Okay. I think this is winning. I mean, if I promote with check, first of all. So probably in hindsight, he should not go to g2. But also, probably here after a4, I definitely just take the pawn. Okay, let's analyze the game. I think I had a pretty good position from the opening, but definitely got a bit low on time and some unnecessary spots. Oops, wrong button. All right, so knight f3, knight f6, b3, bishop b2, d5. Here we do recommend going for c4. We don't. If pretty much here in a lot of the situations you're trying to decide after you develop the bishop to b2, where do I put my light square bishop afterwards? Do we go for e3 and bishop b5? Do we go for e3 and bishop e2 to d3? Do we go g3 and bishop g2? Against this specific configuration, we don't really want to go e3 because there's no future on b5 just yet, when the pawn is not on c5 just yet. Because essentially here, if you check, black will just block with the pawn. So e3 doesn't make a ton of sense in this exact moment, even though I do end up playing c4 first, and then playing e3 afterwards. But if you go for g3, the downside of this particular setup is that after bishop g2, let's say this occurs, this is also in the course, but through a different move order. The slight drawback here is if you go for c4 to attack the center, black has d4 to gain more space and shut down the bishop on b2. If you try to go for d4, this pawn break's not fantastic because black takes and then has two pawns in the center. If you go for d3 followed by e4, first of all, black has that square covered enough, and so the pawn breaks are a little hard to pull off here. So it's best in this case just to get in the move c4 right away, then e3, then knight c3. We do trade the pawns, trade the knights, and we do end up in this type of pawn structure where we're pretty happy if black ever takes the pawn on d4. For instance, if they take, I would take with the... My first instinct was the queen, but taking with the knight also makes perfect sense. Knight on d4 blockading the pawn's pretty good. Knight f5 is an idea. Knight c6 is an idea. Put the bishop on d3 and try to attack in the kingside direction. And black also has a bad bishop on b7, a weak isolated pawn on d5. These are not great things for them to have. In the game, though, he played queen to b8. And I thought this was a bit weird. Wasn't really entirely sure his game plan. Maybe he wants to play some kind of rook to c8. So I went for bishop b5, and knight f6 ends up being an error for him. Because now I do get to take on c5. If he takes with the bishop, we take on f6, and the pawn structure is just abysmal. We're going to attack on the king side pretty quickly here as well. And if he takes with the pawn, as he did in the game, now I can take on f6. Once again, if he takes with the pawn, then he has that bad pawn structure, and if he takes with the bishop, he lost the pawn, as happened in the game. Yeah, so essentially here, knight to f6 was just a mistake that leads to him either losing a pawn or having a bad pawn structure. So he decided to lose the pawn instead of having the bad pawn structure. And I kind of just started overthinking here, to be honest. It seemed like I was just thinking way too much. This was a 14-second think, 6-second think. I did play e4 pretty quickly. E4 is not even the best move. You could trade rooks and then play e4, apparently. But yeah, we end up with a better position. We are up a pawn, so I mean, it is going to be better for us. A little bit of maneuvering around. I was decently happy with the maneuvering phase here. should have gone knight d6 right away, in hindsight. I tried this kind of trap. I was essentially thinking, okay, he'll trade the queens and then take the pawn, after which this is a big problem for him. But then as soon as I played the move, I realized he could take the pawn first. And yeah, knight to d6 is not a good move here. Because the problem is, even though I am up the exchange, yeah, he should have played bishop f5. I guess bishop e7 as he played in the game also works, but I thought bishop f5 was very simple. He threatens the knight, and he also just threatens to promote the pawn since he covers the two squares in front of the pawn. So would have deservedly lost from here. Instead, though, him taking on d6 is very surprising because now I'm winning. And now I can get the rook behind the pawn to stop it, and now this is a winning position, but I had burned way too much time earlier in the game. Should not be taking the pawn. Honestly, I kind of just spazzed out a little bit in the time trouble. My king is stopping the pawn. I should just go hunt down the other pawns. It's pretty clear cut to do that. That is simply winning. This is also better, but obviously much more complicated, and given the fact that I had no time on the clock, it would have been easier to move the rook around a ton of times and make pre-moves and stuff like that. I am still winning here, but it would have been better to not give the rook up for the pawn for the in blitz especially. In a classical game, yeah, white's winning, but in a blitz game, it's better to keep the rook alive and jump it around a bunch. Okay, so we end up losing this one on time, and the previous one against Svane on time. So let's see if we can get some redemption in the next game. All right, another game here against Bagian 31. This is Myanmar, Burma. Interesting. All right, they go for c6. We're still going to stick with b3 here. Black will probably play d5. Yeah, and then we're going to play bishop to b2. Here we're going to put the bishop on g2 instead of playing e3 because there's not really much of a future on this diagonal. Bishop goes to g2, castle. Going to play for d3, c4. Against a5, I like the a3 move a lot of the time because if he plays a4, we play b4. I'm going to go knight to d2 here, probably follow up with c4 pretty quickly. Queen on c2, one of the rooks on c1, probably the other rook on c1 though. Maybe even rook to b1 and try to set up the b4 pawn break. This is another idea. Could also play bishop c3 first. Knight e5 also looks pretty good. I think I might do that first. I'm not in a rush to take this bishop necessarily, but it is at least an idea to consider. It's also not going anywhere, so I'm not in a rush. I'm going to go here and try to set up a b4 push. Now that he's trying to open the position, maybe I will take now, though. Yeah, because b4 is going to be kind of annoying. Okay, I'm going to make this capture. If he takes with the queen, I'll probably take on f6 or take a5. He takes with the knight. Now b4's less of a concern, honestly. I think I'm going to go e3. If he does that, I'll take, and then have to move the queen away. Let's go rook b1. Becoming a little bit more annoying, I will say. Alright, let's actually go knight f3. I'm burning way too much time here. Yeah, he does go b4, understandably. Let's just go queen to probably e2. Oh, e2, knight c5, right? Knight c5's coming next move anyways. I think I'll do this. Just keep both of these pawns covered. Rook to d1 after knight c5. Understandable. Definitely a bit awkward, I will say here. Let's do this, I guess. If he moves this knight, I have to play like knight d2 or something. Okay, here I can poke the rook and play bishop. Here I can play something like bishop d4. Then I go here. I don't mind this trade of bishops in the grand scheme of things, I will say. Maybe I should. But I guess I take the pawn on a5 though, right? So I am ahead of pawn. The knight on b4 is destabilized, which is a good thing. And I also have some pressure on the c5 knight. If he takes here, I take back, hit the queen. Let's go knight to d4. I also want to play pawn to d4. we'll do this first. If he plays e5, I have knight f5. Okay. Maybe I'll just guard the d3 pawn so I can move the queen. I want to go queen on c3. That would be kind of a better location. Alright, let's try to do this quickly, though. Okay, take with the d pawn. Okay, bishop back on g2, I suppose. Probably goes back to c5. I'd be happy with knight f6. The knight's not doing much on that square. Okay, let's go here. I can probably play rook d8 or something to pin my knight. Probably I'll bring the knight rook back to d1 soon. He's a little bit frozen here. Okay, here I'll go rook to d2 and set up some discovered stuff. Maybe bishop f3 is better. Knight f5 is a huge threat. Yeah, my rook's guarded now. And let's see, I can take this. This is hanging. What if I go here first, huh? Probably not the best. He has knight e4, but then I can take e5. Threatening this guy and some various discovered check stuff. Okay, I get this. Knight e7's a big threat. And then I take here. Threatening rook to d8 now. He's going to play some kind of g6. Yeah, he's going to do this. Check. Pin. If he takes here, I have the fork. Okay, take that. Let's keep that knight from going to g4. Okay, here. I don't care if he plays... Yeah, so he's going to do that. Take that. It's kind of frozen. Knight goes here. Take this. Check there. Go here. I don't care if I lose the exchange here. He's going to take the... Okay, let's go here, 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 here. Just grabbing all the stuff off the board. Don't really care so much about... As long as I don't stalemate the guy. Now I've got him completely hemmed in. Check here, and checkmate here. Okay, just a lot of fast moving there at the end of the game, just trying to make sure that I don't lose on time for the third game in a row. So we do get the win. Yeah, a bit of a messy feeling game. I don't really feel like I was ever in great control, but yeah, let's analyze it and check it out. So, knight f3, c6, b3. We get our Reti Nimzo Larsen set up here. Decide to go for the double fianchetto mainly because, as I mentioned in the other game, if we go for something like e3, usually you're going for e3 to play somewhere on this diagonal. However, I can't go to b5, I can't go to c4, I'd have to go to e2 or d3, and the only way I'm going to d3 is if I play d4 first, and then the bishop on b2 is not happy about that. So, better in this case to go for g3 and put the bishop on g2 instead. E6, bishop g2, develop, castle. Against a5 type ideas where black wants to play a4 and a3 and just annoy us, I do generally like playing a3 myself. Knight a6, because now if he goes for a4, we, aside from maybe taking, we can also just go for b4, and the big difference is our pawn on b4 is protected this time. So instead of doing that, he went for knight a6. And against this setup, I like going for an early c4, so that's what we went for here. Queen goes to c2. Yeah, the bishop on d7 is just super passive. I think if black is going to play this system, they need to try to play for e5. Right now, black has a solid position, but his pieces are just very passive. Like, knight's on the edge of the board, this knight's not going forward, this bishop's stuck, this bishop's on f8, you know, rook is blocked behind a pawn. Even when the rook goes to c8, it's blocked behind a pawn. His position is very dependent on playing for e5, b5, or c5. In the game, he went for b5, which is probably a decent idea given the circumstance. But yeah, probably in hindsight, what I should be doing is not being married to this b4 pawn break I was thinking about. I should probably just be playing e4 and f4 on the king side. This looks a bit better in hindsight. I went for bishop c3, though. He does go for b5. I do decide to make the capture of the bishop. I thought in my mind that the position's going to open up soon because there is another pawn break on the board, so I thought getting the bishop pair would be good here. But the thing is, the bishop, again, is not going anywhere. I don't need to take it just yet. If I am going to take it, I don't need to go for it immediately. So probably better to keep that knight on the board instead. A little bit of maneuvering around here. Queen to b1 to keep the d3 and b3 pawns protected. I was thinking about queen to e2, but I thought knight c5 was not easy to meet. Apparently, we can go for d4, lose the pawn, hit the queen, and then I guess the knight's trapped. I didn't think about that. So I just decided to keep everything safe and solid. Get the rook to d1 to protect the d3 pawn, pin the knight. In the grand scheme of things, this doesn't really do a ton. He just moves away. But now I get to make this skewer, get the bishop, and win the pawn. So now I am up a pawn at least. He goes rook to c8, knight to d4. Not the best move. Could play pawn to d4. I thought about this, but I didn't really like the look of letting his knight get onto this the e4 square. But okay, makes sense. Knight d4, bishop f1 to guard the d3 pawn. A lot of just kind of trying to play quick and maneuvering here. I am down like a full minute, and so I'm really just trying to make, you know, decent looking moves relatively quickly. I wanted to get the queen on the c3 square. Whether it's best or not, I'm not sure. e5 ends up being a big mistake. Apparently I could have taken on c6. This is definitely much better. Hit the queen, hit the rook, hit the knight. I did miss that tactic in the game. Went for knight f5 instead, and then bishop g4. But this still ends up working out in the game anyways. He lost the e-pawn, walked into this fork. Now rook to d8's a threat, and the rest of the game is pretty much over here. That being said, I have to play very, very fast, given that I am down about 40 seconds or 45 seconds on the clock, but I was able to get the job done and get the win. All right, so that's going to be it for that one. Let's play a fifth game. I played 5 in the first, previous video, and I'll do 5 in this one. So let's get at least one more in. All right, so we are two wins, 2 losses so far. Let's see if we can get over the 50% mark on this one. So our opponent plays d4. We are going to try to get a Binko gambit. They play knight f3. I'm still going to play c5 anyways. And now they're playing kind of a Colle setup. I do recommend playing d5 in this position. b3 here is not supposed to be great because the problem is I take on d4. And kind of similar to the other game we just looked at, where my opponent also played like a b6 and then took back with the pawn on d4, we're going to kind of get maybe a very similar pawn structure. That being said, I'm going to develop the knight, develop the bishop, put this pawn here. I think I can already go knight to b4. Knight to b4, there is bishop b5, which is annoying, I will say. Do I want to try this? I don't think it's the best move, but it's blitz. Let's see what our opponent does. I do think this check is... Oh, interesting. I mean, can I take the pawn? Am I crazy? Okay. Hit the queen. And then I go here and just try to trade the bishops. Because I still don't like this bishop b5 idea. So let's just go here to try to trade the bishops. And I'm also threatening knight c2. There's knight c2. And then if I take the rook, he gets this bishop and my knight's trapped. So I take this guy first. Then I take here. And now I am just up the exchange. I'm going to castle. And okay, we're down a minute, but now I can play quick moves a lot easier. Let's play this to limit the knight. Play knight e4 pretty soon. Trade knights if he plays knight to d2, totally fine. Do this. Yeah, he's just trying to play fast moves, understandably. Let's hit the bishop. Let's offer a queen trade. These are probably not the best moves or anything like that, but I'm simply trying to play fast. Okay, happy to trade. Yeah, he's going to play knight e5 afterwards. Let's just go rook to c3, I guess. I'll play queen f5 if he plays knight e5, or queen g5. Probably queen g5. I think we guarantee the trade unless he wants to go to h2. Okay, so he does have knight f3. Okay, here I'm going to play f6 just to kick the knight. Could have played rook c8, maybe a little more precise. Okay, here to guard the pawn, double the rooks, and just try to trade rooks. I know I can attack these pawns. I do understand that that is a way of doing things. I'm just simply going to try to get the rooks off the board. Inevitably, he will kind of have to acquiesce to the trade, otherwise I will take on f2. And then here I can, let's just go after, let's go after the b pawn first. If he checks, I go to g6, no big deal. Yeah, this game is over. I mean, I have a minute less than him, but I'm ahead so much at this point that it doesn't really matter all that much. I will say this is another pawn. I can run the king around to h7 if he gives a check. I have this check to push the king backwards. Now I could just hit the knight, play king h6. I lose this pawn, not the biggest deal in the world, to be honest. Let's go rook to g4. I want to play rook to c2. I'm also limiting the knight and guarding the g-pawn. And now we'll just push the d-pawn. I think this is the simplest thing to do. Push here, play rook c2. You can also play rook c6 and try to trap the knight, or rook e4. Probably should have done that. Rook e4, I think, would just flat out win the knight very soon. Okay, this isn't really threatening anything, to be honest. Again, these are not the best moves or anything necessarily, but they are good enough. I don't really care if I lose the exchange, to be quite honest with you here. Yeah, not the best moves. Not really looking to play with the most precision here. Really just trying to play fast. Just gonna put the king on g2, that's fine. I have the g and f pawns, that's the whole problem for him here. F3 check, and then G3 if he goes to H2. Okay, let's not blunder something silly here. I can now just play rook H1. Yeah. Okay, we go here. If he takes, I skewer. I have queen e1 checkmate threat if he doesn't. Let's lock him on the back rank, and then we'll just push the g-pawn. We get the win. Okay, so nice to finish on a win here. Let's analyze the game and take a look at this one. All right, so d4, knight f6, knight f3. No bingo gambits just yet in the two videos of this Blitz series, but they'll come. There will be some bingo gambits for sure at some point. c5, e3, d5. This is what I recommend in my chessable course. On the bingo gambit, even though this is not a bingo gambit, the chessable course is a full repertoire against the move d4, so even if they don't play into the bingo gambit, I give you all the different recommendations of what to do on all the second and third move options and stuff like that after d4. So b3 is not precise. The best move is to take on d4. The drawback to b3 is that usually in these kind of situations, white... let me put it this way. If white does take back with the pawn, the bishop is kind of committed to the b2 square in some ways. You know, if the pawn was on b2, then the bishop can go somewhere else on the diagonal. If the bishop doesn't go to b2 after you've already played b3, then you do end up with weaknesses, especially on the c file. The c2 pawn is a little bit backwards. Even if you play c3, it needs piece protection because there's no pawn on b2. And if you play c4, then you're kind of walking into either an isolated pawn structure if white takes back with the piece, or going into that hanging pawn structure that we kind of saw in the game a couple games ago in this episode. So it's kind of not the best setup for white to do things. If white is going to try to play for b3, I think they should be like developing first and maybe go for c3 and then b3 later. c3 because then you can recapture on d4 with the pawn. I will point out real quick that if white tries to take back with the knight or the queen here, first of all, if you take with the queen, you're kind of just asking to get hit by knight c6 at some point. And if you take with the knight, black simply has the ability to have 2 pawns in the center of the board, which is quite nice for us. So we hit the knight goes back, knight c6. You know, here we can defend the pawn. We just get a space advantage, and usually in most openings, if black is getting a space advantage, white's kind of done something wrong. Generally speaking, black should not be getting a space advantage in the opening of really any game, especially not one that's this big, let's put it that way. So anyways, though, white does take back with the pawn on d4, and we focus on developing here. Yeah, knight to b4 is not the best move. I'm actually a little bit surprised that castling works here. Yeah, he has to throw in this bishop to b5 check at some point. I even said during the game I knew knight b4 wasn't the most precise, but I was, you know, it's blitz. We gamble a little bit. I think he should have checked on b5, and first of all, I would not have played king e7. That's kind of crazy. I would maybe have thought about knight to d7, but yeah, if he goes knight e5, I kind of have to sacrifice a pawn. I will say it's not much of a sacrifice, because even if this happens, you do get pressure on the c-file, and you do get the bishop pair despite being down the pawn. So it's not much of a sacrifice. It's pretty decent compensation. But because it's blitz, we roll the dice a little bit here, and my opponent just blunders. Apparently knight to d3 is even better than bishop d3. That makes perfect sense in hindsight. White would have to take the knight because the queen is trapped otherwise, and then we are going to be up a pawn and up the exchange. In the game, we kind of got that anyways, but it would have been a much more guaranteed version of things if I had gone knight d3. So yeah, bishop d3 was not the best, for sure. He just kind of blunders the house, though. Now I'm just up a pawn and the exchange. And for the most part, just trying to play fast, trying to play logical moves. I have no clue if these are the best or anything like that. Just trying to make quick moves here. Trade pieces, happy to do that. Trade queens. He can't really avoid the queen trade, which is nice. The only way to avoid it is go to h2, and that just looks very sad. So he does trade the queens. And then here, after he plays a4, I completely understand that I can go rook c4 and hit the pawns and stuff like that. My game plan, though, was just to guard the e-pawn, and then really I just wanted to trade the rooks. If the rooks come off the board, it's much easier to win the game rather than if the rooks, pair of rooks stay on the board. So I hunt the rook down, To avoid the rook trade, he has to give up the f2 pawn, and then, we just pick up everything. Definitely more precise moves are available here, but inevitably we got the win. I give up the exchange here. Well, kind of have to be honest, because he's taking on g2 either way. But even if my rook was on g1 or something, or I guess I would take the knight for free, I didn't mind losing the exchange here. Let's put it that way. I lose the exchange, but I'm ahead 4 pawns. Now I'm only ahead 3. Doesn't really matter. Again, speed is the name of the game here. Eventually get the pawn down to b2. The nice thing is when you have the pawn on b2, rook in front of the pawn and rook behind the pawn, if the f and g pawns were gone, this would be, I think this would be a draw, or at least significantly more difficult to win, as long as white keeps their king on these 2 squares. However, if the king moves pretty much to any other square, if it moves up to the 3rd rank, I can give a check and then promote. If he moves to f2, I can do this nice little tactic, in-game tactic with rook h1, and then if he takes the pawn, we wrap around and make a skewer. So really the king has to stay on these 2 squares. And if I didn't have the f or g pawns on the board, it can stay on those 2 squares a lot easier. But because I have these pawns, I'll just push these guys up the board as I did. Inevitably, I will be able to kind of kick the king off of one of those 2 squares. If the king goes to h2, then pawn to g3 would have been checkmate. So now that he's off of that square, you don't want to play rook h1 here. I almost played this thinking, oh, if he takes the pawn, I skewer. But he would skewer himself. He would skewer me from a different direction. And now I would actually be losing because now I am not promoting any of the pawns. So that would have been a very unfortunate end of the game. I avoided that mistake. Now I just have to walk the king closer to the rook. He has no more checks. I do get to finally play rook h1. And then, yeah, we eventually win the rook, and that's game over there. All right, so it looks like here we finished the this particular video on 3 wins, 2 losses, so 3 out of 5. I believe I started off with a 2656 rating. I can double check that real quick. Let's see here. There. Yeah, I was 2656 to start the day. We are 2666 now, so it's a pickup of 10 rating points, inching closer and closer to the 2700 mark. I've actually not been 2700 on this on my main chess.com account before. I think the highest I've been is somewhere right around 2698 or 2695, somewhere in there, if I remember correctly. And so, yep, we're going to try to inch closer and closer and eventually hopefully get over the 2700 mark. Hopefully you've enjoyed this video for this episode. If you're interested in checking out another video of the channel, you'll see it to the left of the on the video page here. And that being said, I will see you in the next video. Talk to you in the next one.